Hello there guys, and welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week I am once again joined by Chris and Dave from the Comics in Motion podcast. Now if you didn't tune in last week, then I really recommend you go check that out before listening to this one, as this is part 2 of our chat. You don't necessarily need to have heard the first part for anything in the second part to make sense, but it makes for a much fuller conversation. Now, with Chris and Dave, not only are they the hosts of Comics in Motion and the creators of Comics in Motion, but they also are the hosts and creators of VHS Strikes Back and Chris and Dave's Reality Cast. Chris also has Wrestling Gold as well, which I spoke about a couple episodes ago, and my other podcast, Star Wars Comics in Canon, airs on the Comics in Motion feed, so lots of there to talk about. Couple of quick bullet points before the chat gets started. We speak about podcast production and editing, as well as a huge mess up I did a couple weeks ago, maybe it's a couple months ago now, with the In the Black podcast, because I'm a dingus, but basically I'm just a prat. We also speak about reality TV, Chris and Dave's Reality Cast, podcast audiences, listeners, interaction, YouTube, and that sort of thing. So that's what you can expect from this chat. Just before the chat gets started, there will be a quick promo for the #1 rerun podcast, so make sure you check those guys out. They're a part of the Brit pod scene, which both Comics in Motion and Genuine Chit-Chat are a part of as well. Nice little collaborative network. So yeah, really cool chat today. Really hope you guys enjoy it. And once the chat with Chris and Dave's finished, I'll be back at the end to tell you guys what's coming up in the next few shows and things, what I did in my episode of Star Wars Comics in Canon, and a couple of other bits and pieces. So yeah, make sure you tune into the end, guys. As I always say, I really appreciate anyone listening to this chat. I really appreciate anyone sharing it, reviewing on iTunes, all those sorts of places, although it's now Apple Podcasts, but still, I appreciate any interaction of any kind, any listeners at all, and any sharing, so keep up what you guys are doing. So I'll leave it there. Thanks so much again, guys, and I'll talk to you at the end.
Hello, this is a shameless promo for #1 Rerun podcast.
We are Zoe and Carla, and each episode we get pop culture nostalgic after asking the listeners one simple question. Give us a date.
That's right, submit a date of your choice and you can hear anecdotes like the following. A little bit. I know he married Paula Abdul and then that was the end of him.
What was the reality thing she did?
Oh, she did American Idol, but before American Idol, I mean, she danced with a cat, which is weird, because why was she going out with a cartoon cat?
No, more to the point, she slept in a bed with the cat, Carla.
She did lots with that cat, and you know what? You hear scandals about other people, nothing's ever come out about that, which I find weird. Available free because you wouldn't pay for it on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, or anywhere else you can find podcasts.
Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people, and I'm your host, Mike Burton.
I think I found the same thing as you did, and I think it's less so with the recording aspect of podcasting, but it's more the editing. Mm-hmm. When you hear yourself back speaking, some things jar with you. When you're going, and yes, and it's a very natural thing to do. And then you're listening to yourself and you're like, Jesus Christ, can you say a bit more? And it's like, at first you're trying to edit them out and then you're like, oh, for fuck's sake, there's too many. And it's like, well, if I speak like this in work, fucking hell, I'd be falling asleep. So, it kind of helps you to understand, how does it feel when you're listening to me? Because when you're editing, you are listening to yourself, but it's like you're listening to yourself as a third person. It's not really you. It's the recorded you. And so, no, I agree. It's definitely been a positive thing for me.
And what about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think so as well. It's interesting because Dave's about the herb bit. When I used to do my other podcast, the contextual one, and then I did a fitness one before that, and that was the Figure 4, which was the name of my personal training business at the time. And Dave messaged me and I remember him saying, he's like, I said, what do you think of it? But this is well before we were even doing anything. And it was just one comment Dave said about, you say a lot. And I was like, you're joking. And I listened back and I was like, fuck me. And obviously I'm trying not to say it now, but it's one of them where I literally would spend an hour editing them out then. It really became a fucking obsession for every episode. I'm like, right, that's gone. That's gone. And I find that when I listen back to me doing podcasts, that if I can just flow, I very rarely say it. Like on the wrestling one, I've said it a couple of times because we're talking about a subject sometimes that we're both going into, me and the guest, that have never watched an event. So you're trying to find and you're tripping yourself up. And Umms a very good link into getting back to what, you know, I'm thinking of something to say, but it fucking drove me mad. It really did. And when I listen now, me and Dave very rarely say it, and I don't even think about it when I'm editing. I'm just literally looking for errors, or if we've had to stop to get a brew or whatever, you know, things like that, you know, life happens. But I think also from the flip side is I have, as much as like it's about the podcasting and that, I'm doing a presentation at work a week on Monday where like these directors have approached me and they're like, can you do an interview? Because doing like Zoom now, Microsoft Teams. And they're like, we want you to present it like a podcast. Well, we know you're the podcasting guy. Well, I know there's other people in my business who do podcasts. There's a girl there who's got like a murder one. And it's fucking massive, I believe. But they've not gone to her. I don't know whether she's in or she may be furloughed, to be fair. But it's like, the whole company's like, yeah, Chris is the podcasting guy. But the director's asking me, I want to set a podcast up about webinars last week. One of the HR directors, I want to do it as a series. How do it? And sat there just writing stuff down that I'm telling him. And I'm like, look, I am self-taught. I am not an aficionado, but knowledge is power. And when you do something so long, I believe that there's a saying that from DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, a wrestler, because I do his yoga and stuff. And he says it, and it's true. Repetition is the mother of learning. And the more you do something, the better you become at it. Whether like the editing, Dave was the man for editing when we started. I could edit a podcast, but not like Dave can. And I have just literally just self-taught myself. Yeah, I know when sometimes I can listen and I go, yeah, you can hear Dave's. There's a different difference in our editing, but no one else will be able to tell that. Who edits our podcast wouldn't know. But, you know, you're just trying to get better at something because I am literally Mr. Rush. I fucking rush. If I was one of the Mr. Men, I'd be Mr. Rush because it's like, right, get it done. Right, it's done. You know, and I trip myself up sometimes. Most of the time I don't, but there is times there. And I think it's just repetition, doing stuff, and you just become better at something. But in my overall life, I think because I was a singer in a band, and I wasn't the best singer in the world by any stretch of the imagination. And you know, when I started doing that, I was fucking goddamn awful. But by the end of it, I was a competent singer. I'm never going to win fucking X Factor or be singing up there singing Ness and Dorma to somebody or whatever. You know what I mean? But I was competent. I could do it in a band, and that was more repetition. Just getting better, finding tricks, finding ways around the song. You shit at singing, but you know that you can get away with it. Hide behind the band, pull off on the mic. These techniques, and that's like in anything you become good at. These techniques, but editing now is second nature to both of us. We can literally blast an episode. I'm sure you're the same, mate. Can blast an episode off less than no time. Yeah, because when we're recording, you're also listening for. Have we fucked up today? Have we done this? Have we done that? You know, and you whiz through some, but it's just little things you pick up doing it. But I do think as a person, it's made me a bit less of a rush merchant, even though I do have my moments still. It making me take a deep breath sometimes, even though explaining this, I know I haven't taken a breath, but yeah, anyway.
Well, no, yeah, I mean, I agree with my editing. I remember early on the podcast, I was like you guys. First of all, I'd say constantly, and I've tried to make a conscious effort to not say as much. But obviously, I'm quite used to. I go off on one sometimes. I talk a lot, and with me and my mates, sometimes we can get interrupted quite quickly if you haven't finished making your point. Not because anyone's rude, because everyone's trying to say something, but saying shows you're still going to say something rather than you just stopped. And that's why I think I've kind of picked up the habit of doing it. And I've tried to make an effort of not doing it as much. But when you go into editing and things, obviously we can edit them all out. I remember, first year or so of podcasting, I've been okay with editing because I used to do video editing because I used to have a YouTube channel and things. And when you've done video editing, audio editing is so much fucking easier than video editing. Jesus Christ. Video editing is awful. Trying to sync up audio and things, and then that person sneezed there, right? Let's clip that bit up. I'll make sure their mouth moves at the right time of this bit when you clip it back in. Oh, nightmare. But when it came to editing early days, I would be listening to every second like perfectly. Okay, that person said before it. Let's cut that out. Oh, that person said the same, like when instead of just right, let's edit out that first like edit every single thing out so the whole thing is perfect. And you spend about 3 hours editing like 40 minutes or something when it should really take you, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half or something. But you take so much longer. And then when you actually listen to podcasts where people say occasionally, as long as it's not to a ridiculous degree, you don't even really click with it. Because there was a podcast I did, and I think I did it quite a bit. And I think one of my friends listened to it, or maybe Megan did or something. And I was like, oh, well, that podcast was saying all the time. And they're like, didn't even notice. Because I think a lot of the time, unless you know, a lot of the time when you say or when you hear you don't necessarily consciously absorb it. When you remember a podcast, you don't remember all the ums necessarily. You remember the actual information. But when you're editing it and you can hear it constantly, it drives you a bit mad. So I've had to kind of, because I've obviously got now the 2 podcasts and things, and now that I live with Megan and things, I don't want to be sat, like before I could sit in a room by myself, and if I edited a podcast for 6 hours, it doesn't matter because I'm not doing anything else. But when it's 6 hours of podcast editing is taking time away from me spending with my girlfriend or doing something more fun, then it becomes, okay, how can I do this better? And what I've started doing now is I do listen to podcasts, but normally I just make little notes. If someone coughs or something, I'll make a note of it. Or if I really trip over my words, I'll make a note. Or if I really horrendously interrupt someone. But apart from that, generally it's just if it's me with one other person, I kind of look at the waveforms and things, see if there's any huge spikes, because that's normally like a cough or something, and see if there's any gaps. Just because sometimes with audio latency or lag online or whatever, you know, someone asks a question and then there's a big gap. And if you listen to that, you go, God, that sounds like the most awkward conversation ever. But it's not really, but you have to edit it out and things. So I have found that with editing and things, it is something that I'm now better at editing. And my editing now sounds better than it ever did, but I actually edit less, which is quite weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for us, Chris, it was probably... So I dabbled a bit in an amateurish way with sort of music editing. So, you know, kind of using, I think it was at Sony's Acid Studio at the time. And I used to be up in the early hours of the morning, sort of doing samples and dropping various beats. Now, most of my kind of musical influence is more guitar-based stuff, but I found with just the computer, I was doing all this fucking jungle shit, and it was just brilliant. But you just get used to that editing process, and so it was quite a natural thing for me to be able to do the editing. So I was quite happy to go ahead. Just I'll do the editing, and then I kind of know where we are. And as we were feeling our way with what the format was going to be, and you know what we were going to do, and everything like that, so I was quite happy to go on. And to be fair, I mean, Chris was quite keen. You know, it's like, no, I'll get in. I want to do the editing. I want to feel like. And he's right, you know, it needs to feel like that partnership. You can't have things all one way or all the other. And I think when we initially started, I think Chris wasn't at the same level that he is now, is the diplomatic way I'll put it.
No, it's true, yeah. I was talking shit. No, it's fine, yeah.
So you'd have music and it'd be like, da, 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 boom, stops. And then, you know, massive pause and then the vocals kick in or something like that. And it's one of those things that when you've been doing editing for a while, whether it's music, whether it's podcast, you know, conversational stuff, your ear just automatically picks stuff up for free. So stuff that's obvious when you've been doing it for a while isn't obvious when you haven't been doing it for a while. And so that's all it was. And so we started to sort of, you know, Chris would do some of the editing, and then I'd, you know, in my diplomatic but sometimes blunt way, I'd say, well, okay, this really needs to be better in this bit, you know, in this aspect or whatever. And then eventually we got to the point where, you know, Chris was doing the editing as much as me, and where I was being meticulous is taking out all the ers and then making sure that, you know, when one person speaks, there's not, you know, maybe a millisecond, but no longer than a millisecond before the other person kicks in. So it sounds really snappy and one person's going to the other. Whereas Chris wouldn't necessarily do that, but would get, you know, episodes out a lot quicker than I could. And when I'd listened back to the ones that Chris had done, I was like, you know what? I can't actually tell the difference. All that extra effort is probably the only person who would ever notice is me. You know, and it doesn't sound like the conversation is labouring. And one of the things that's difficult over sort of radio / podcasting is when you're doing it remotely, you can't see the other person. So sometimes those awkward pauses are just making sure you're polite and making sure that the other person has actually finished saying what they want to say. And so, you know, those sort of things you might chop out. But some of the, you know, if someone's really thinking hard about a question and they're like, you know, well, I don't know. And we'll keep that in because it's sort of telling you that, well, it's not a straightforward yes or no thing. They're having to think about it themselves. So, no, I agree. I think I'm not quite going to say less is more with the editing, but it is about finding that sweet spot with how much work do you put in, compared to the final end product.
Mm-hmm. And also as well, Mike, we were that fucking long on Comics Emotions. We were running for like nearly 2 hours. So you've got nearly 4 hours worth of editing each week. And you're like, and Dave did the majority of especially the first few. Fucking hell. I used to say, you all right, don't have help? Because I knew full well he's tearing his fucking hair out. Dave's got he's got family there, he's got kids, he's got a fucking job, he's working from home, I'm nearly done it, I'm halfway through it. But it's a labour of love because you love it. And I think that's why we trimmed the podcast down. Now all our podcasts are less than an hour pretty much, aren't they? Because and it's not from I don't think the content suffered. We were probably going too in depth, walking scene by scene on a review of a movie. When you listen to the old stuff, and I put them on every now and again, listening to like the quality of the sound has improved, and not realizing that it has as we bought better equipment and we got better and better software and we're editing and stuff. But just listening to us talk scene by scene about a fucking film like Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is absolute shit, but also amazing because it's the Hoff. So it's like we absolutely love that episode. But when you listen back, you're like, we talked for like an hour and 45, an hour and 50. And all I can think of, Mike, is fucking hell, Dave must have been terrible. It must have been nearly 3.5 hours worth of editing to get it to, get it to print, basically. And that sounds daft, but it's stuff you think of when you're producing a podcast between us. Is that it's the back, like they sort of social media stuff. You've got the editing takes more than anything. That's more than presenting, to be honest. It's such a great hobby that we love. And I don't want to sound like I'm moaning because I'm not. We do a podcast every day. Literally, one of us is pretty much editing a podcast every single day with our various different projects. But it's more, we've got it to a point where we can manage all of them by just condensing the time, but hopefully not getting rid of the quality that we had initially. So I think you just learn. We've learned that less is more sometimes with the quality of the podcast, because we know what hopefully people listen, and we haven't seen a drop in listeners, so we just go with it, and it seems to be working for us. So I just think it's there. It's something you learn over time. And it's a great learning experience. 200, 300, 400 episodes later, and we're at a bit of a flow, a bit of a rhythm. And I get that with any job, what you do. And this isn't a job; it's a hobby we're absolutely so passionate about.
Yeah, I mean, with linking to with Star Wars comics and canon, one of the things that I found when I was doing that was, I think the first few episodes I did, they're creeping up and becoming longer again. Like the last couple I've done were half an hour, 40 minutes long, and I'm trying to keep them a little bit less. I'm not going to sacrifice quality or content to make it fit into this small thing. And I know that you guys aren't doing that either. But when the early days I'd record and I'd be like, oh man, that's going to be so long. And then I'd edit it down. It's only like 15 minutes. And I'm not used to that in the same way, because in Genuine Chit-Chat, whenever I'm not talking, someone else is. Whereas obviously when I'm doing it just myself talking in a room, when I'm not talking, no one is, and that's nothing. And a weird thing about editing that was, I was finding that when I was speaking, I'd mess up. So I'd trip over my words or something. And obviously in a normal conversation, if you trip over your words, it doesn't really matter if there's two of you, because you bounce off each other. But when it's you solo doing a podcast, just your voice, in my opinion, you have to be a little bit more stringent, especially with the way I'm doing it. It's meant to be about Star Wars, not about me tripping over words and things. So I try and keep it clean-ish as well. And I just try to swear in it and stuff, whereas obviously in Genuine Chit-Chat I swear quite a bit. And it's the editing of it is different. But what I've learned is, in Star Wars comics and canon, if I ever say the wrong thing or I mess up really badly, I don't stop the recording like I did. I mean, this is only like 12, like I've only been doing 12 episodes. I've only been doing it for a couple months or a few months, and I'm already realising things that I was doing only a couple months ago, and I'm still learning, because I trip over words and then I'd immediately correct myself and then keep on going. And then when I go through the editing, I have to listen to every second, because I know I've tripped up somewhere and I need to align it. Whereas now, I know when I've recorded with you guys in Comics Emotions, sometimes when you do the intro bit, one of you trips over your words completely and you're like, right, let's take a 1 or 2 second pause and try again. And then we get to edit, you see this big gap and you're like, that's not an awkward silence or a latency gap, that's a gap for a reason. Mm-hmm. And then when you see that, that's now with comics and canon, I'll basically just kind of skip. But if I mess up in any way, I'll just stop for a second or so and then continue again. And then editing is, it's so much easier doing it that way. but it's obviously it's a different thing to handle than a conversational podcast editing compared to a solo podcast editing.
Yeah, I mean, we've tripped up a few times, haven't we, Chris? Because, I mean, I've done it maybe 2 or 3 times where you basically top and tail, your audio tracks. So, I'll kind of like just make sure the beginning's right, make sure the end's right, and you know that the conversation just flowed, so you don't have to go back. But then you forget that at some point you went, oh, fucking hell, and something or other. And I tell you, it wasn't one of mine or Chris's. It was back when I was doing the coaching. Now, I was pretty militant in making sure that we didn't swear on that coaching podcast, because it was all around grassroots coaching and coaching kids. So it's not appropriate for me if you're doing that and you're swearing on the podcast. But I did all the editing for that one. And I just remember there was this one episode. My co-host, Ben, he had some builders in the house and they were trying to pull a fast one or something. And he did sort of, not to them, I think he was shouting to his wife or something, and did shout that they were being seen next Tuesdays. And somehow I missed that in the editing. so it was like, oh, just a minute, Dave. I think it might have been you, actually, Chris.
I rang you. I said, fucking hell, Dave.
He's like, just a minute, Dave. And he's shouting down. He's like, okay, effing and blinding and C-wording. And so I was mortified that I'd missed that. And so
I was crying because I tell you why. It was the fact that Ben's persona is, I've never met him in person, but we did like the Chat Footy podcast together and that. And he's very sort of dry and he's very calm and
very measured.
Yeah, very measured. He's having a wobble. And I rang Dave and went, you do know that there's a section in the middle where he's fucking having a pop with his missus about something. And Dave was like, oh, fuck. But to be fair, mate, I did it last week, didn't I, Dave? Fucking VHS there, forgetting that there was a section in the middle where Dave had to go to the door because it was Jade was walking the dog and I fucking left it in, didn't I? And Max was like, there's a gap of 2 minutes in the middle, don't you? And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. And I had to go in and then re-edit it. And I was like, you absolute bellend. So I've had my fair share. Luckily, we weren't fucking having a pop at anybody, were we? Because that would have been...
Oh, no, yeah.
Oh, I tell you what, I did one which was terrible and I was so embarrassed by it. And it wasn't an editing thing, it's even worse. And I had, there's a podcast I listen to called In the Black Podcast, and it's one of my favourite indie podcasts. And I've been a fan of this for ages, and I messaged the host, the main one of them, Big O, and they were really up for coming on the show and things. And they made this thing. I was like, because theirs all about giving a black perspective and things, and they're 3 working class black gentlemen in America and things. And so when they came on my show, they were like, we just want to let you know that you're like the first white podcast we've been on, and that sort of thing. They had some pops at me and things for that, and it was fun. It was all banter and jovial and things. And they did good promo for it and everything. And this is literally my most embarrassing podcasting moment ever, and I feel like such a dick. I uploaded the wrong audio file, and I didn't realise for about 5 days until Big O messaged me and said, that podcast, part 1 that we're on, that isn't us. And I was like, what? And this was one where it was probably one of the, if not the biggest podcast, the one I was the most excited to share. They've got a fairly big audience. And obviously, them being the whole podcast was all about the black perspective. And it was so ironic that the fucking white boy managed to fuck up the one podcast about the black perspective. And for the first 5 days it was up, it was me talking with a guy who's the week before, Christopher Gerg, and it's about like cybersecurity and things. It's a great chat, but it couldn't be more polar opposite. And I didn't even realise. And what happened is I uploaded it to like 3 places, but the last place is Podbean, where it goes basically everywhere. And that was the place that I did it wrong. And I just had, when you click choose a file, I just clicked the file one above it to the old one. And I was so embarrassed. And I was like, this was the one podcast that I've tried really hard to promote and I was so excited for and everything. And I saw there was a spike of about 100 more people listening than normal at the day it came out because of the listeners of In the Black podcast. And obviously they downloaded it the day it came out. It wasn't even with the people they downloaded it for. And then when part 2 came out, there was no listener spike because I'd fucked it up. And I was just like, oh. And I spoke to Big O and I apologise. He was like, I know it's fine, these things happen and stuff. But I was just like, my kind of, not opportunity. They don't have a podcast that gets millions of listens. It wasn't like a Joe Rogan opportunity, but it was a really cool way to not only get into a new demographic of some degree that I may not have got into, but one I've been hyping up so much, and I just fucked it up. And it wasn't even like, oh, I messed up, and the next day I didn't realise. My own guest had to tell me. And it's like, oh, fuck. That's just the worst.
That's brutal, isn't it? It's mortifying. But, we're all one-man bands, aren't we? And again, just back to the original point, can we be more than the sum of our parts? I think so. But when you are an indie creator, an indie podcast creator, it is fucking hard to get that episode out there and, do everything perfectly, because there's no supply chain, there's no checks and balances, there's no quality control checks in there unless you do them yourself. So, yeah, it is hard. I feel for you.
I used to check the podcasts quite a lot, but obviously that was the only time I've ever done it, and that was episode 80 something, and obviously there's a lot of part 1s and part 2s, so I think release wise it's about 120th or something. So it's like I've been doing, at that point it's been like 2 years. I did always download an episode just as soon as it got uploaded. I'll double check it just to be sure, and I'm pretty certain it had only been about 5 episodes, maybe 10 episodes before that I actually stopped checking them. And that was just like, oh, and obviously, yeah, it is the one-man band thing. And it is, I've had it before sometimes where it's like a Sunday night, because obviously I release on Sundays, and I'm like, I'm editing and stuff, and obviously doing a passion project. I love podcasting and stuff, but it gets to a point where I've been busy in the day and Sunday, so I had to do it in the evening. And it's one of those podcasts where sometimes the audio for one of the guests is a bit screwed up and you can't align it properly, or certain things, if the recording goes wrong, you have to keep making sure things haven't messed up and things. And I've been on that, and it's been like 11:30 at night, and I've not even finished editing yet, and I'm just like, is this really worth it? And then as soon as I record a single episode, or I get one person message me, or normally it's Tony, saying that they appreciate the episode, immediately it's like, oh, it makes it all worth it, and I feel almost like a dick to myself and almost my own fans for thinking to myself, oh, is it really worth it? Just because I've pratted about on a Sunday and spent too much time, and then, it's late and I've maybe had a couple too many beers and it's a Sunday night and it's taking me twice as long to edit stuff.
It's funny you say that. I mean, we so one of the other podcasts that we mentioned in the past, the Love Island cast, we recently rebranded to the C for Charlie, D for Delta reality cast, which I realised when you say it fully, it sounds like CD. So the CD podcast that we do is just, or CD reality cast that we do. We just decided to open it up from Love Island because, with lockdown and everything, we don't know when the next Love Island will be. So we're like, well, we've built up a following now, and we'll kind of just look at other reality dating TV shows, and we'll kind of wing it. We'll just pick a show and we'll run with it, and then hopefully people will listen. Build it and they will come, kind of thing. And we chose this like little British show called Singletown, which I hadn't heard of before, to be honest. And it doesn't look like it had a massive following. And if you look at their social media, it's nothing. It's completely different gravy from Love Island. Really small. So and then the ITV2 catch-up took the bloody thing offline. And so we were halfway through the series, and then we were like, shit, we can't actually finish this off. And we were like, okay, well, let's just find out what we can find out from like YouTube and Instagram and stuff, find out where they are now, and then just do a wrap-up episode. No sooner had we sort of said that than 2 people from 2 different continents reached out to us and said, look, I've got it on there, I've got it recorded. So we can do like a Skype conference or a Zoom conference or something, and you guys can watch it from my TV, and so you can carry on the podcast that way. Because we'd sort of started covering this other show, and we had to say on that other show that, well, actually, we're not going to be able to finish this previous Singletown show. And so it doesn't, you can't help but be inflated by that, and just having that feedback. I think we all do it for ourselves more than anything. We want to get that content out there to be proud of it, but having that feedback as well, I would be surprised. People may say that they don't care, like the 100% artist, probably French or something, if they were, proper, like, I do it for the art. But most of us normal human beings, we like a bit of validation as well, that, and that positive feedback. And it was great, wasn't it, Chris? Because I was like,
yeah,
what the fuck? Someone's offering for us to beam into their homes, point the laptop in front of their TV, interfere with their evening, even though they've probably watched the episode themselves already. It's just like the lengths that they'll go to for us to be able to talk for shit about it for 15 minutes.
And that's the thing, and it's humbling because we mentioned it before, but that podcast has no preparation. And literally, we sit there, we watch it. The only preparation we got, Mike, I don't make notes usually, but literally with some of these newer ones we're doing, I am sat there on my phone just putting little pointers down and have my phone. I never done that ever, and it's all off the cuff. But it's like 15, 20 minutes of us talking shit, ripping the fuck out of people, all done like not tastefully, not like in a. We're trying to absolutely bring people down. But if we see bad behaviour, we just fucking say it, don't we? So, and I'm the worst for that, as you can tell. I'm terrible for it. But it's one of them where the chemistry between us works. And we get letters and emails. And this isn't like a boasting thing, because it's not. And we've looked at like the downloads for this show, which has only been running for just over a year. We started it last June. What, it's not even a year yet, Dave, is it? Last June when Love Island was starting, end of June. Mike, we're talking like we're going to be hitting nearly 100,000 downloads. And we're like, wow, how the fuck are we hitting 100? And that's not a boasting thing at all, because we put so much work into the podcast. We're both proud of it, but we're proud of it thinking like, if I hit 100,000 downloads, I'd want it to be on like the VHS or the comics, or I would love it to be on the football one more than anything, because that was like mine and Dave's passion. But it's like, it's just ridiculous. Like, I mean, we get involved in these fake romances and dramas, and me and Dave are texting each other going, have you seen that? Oh my God, I can't wait to talk about it. And it's like, what have we become? We were singing in front of audiences about 10 years ago, quite big places and stuff. We had a good following in the band, and then now we're sat there slacking off a reality show. It's just like,
we did have one of our mates coming on, and again, you've worn your reality TV, you've had your colours firmly nailed to the mast for years, Chris, and everyone's taking the piss out of you for a long time. But one of our mates came on and basically tore me a new one by saying, Dave, I understand it from Chris. What the fuck are you doing? You're the normal one.
You're the man of reason, Chris. I've watched reality stuff since day dot. I even tried to get onto Big Brother. Coincidentally, Dave, they're doing a best of Big Brother episodes that's coming on soon on Channel 4 if you fancy some.
Oh, really?
Anyway, that's for another conversation. But it's funny because the guy who said it was the drummer in our band. And he got called out on I thought it was hilarious. We were crying, weren't we? Because he come on, he's a great guy, and he's a good friend. Went to his wedding last year. He's a great guy. But someone called him out on it, and he was like dead offended, wasn't he? And I was like, this is just like anything. You put yourself out there on any platform, you're always going to get somebody giving you shit. It doesn't matter how good or bad you are. Like, we got a 1-star review on the Love Island, because he said, these two don't know women. I'm like, what? We've married for 22
Let's have it right.
years.
We had him on twice, and we got 2 1-star reviews, and both of them were the day after he came on. Now, I'm not saying it was 100% him. It just, I'm just correlating two things together. But I don't know. I hope he's never going to listen to this, Chris, because I don't think we've.
I do. I'll give him some shit for it, Dave.
We haven't spoken to him about that, but someone, and we have quite an active community. When Love Island's on, people are responding to us on Twitter, and again, our followers ended up interacting with each other, and so you end up with this little community kind of thing. But basically, this one guy from Australia absolutely tore fucking strips, on Twitter, basically saying, "Who is that boring? See you next Tuesday on here." I just tore him a new one, like proper 100% trolling. So I think you reached out to him, didn't you, Chris?
Yeah. I just said to him, I said, look, Pleaser said he's a good friend of ours. You know, I've got no problem if you don't like it. And he's like, I'm really sorry. So he took the tweet down, and then in the private he went, he's fucking shit. Don't have him on again, Chris. You know, like, because people were then passionate about the show. And then like we had like this. There's a girl from New York, Kayla, and she literally emailed us, Mike, every single episode. And in the end, we were calling her the queen of the emails, the queen of the show. And every episode, she was like, this person can fuck off and go on a massive rant. Well, we read out all the emails. We're getting, at one point, we were getting like 6, 7, 8 emails per show. And you're like, how the fuck are we going? The whole show was like nearly 15 minutes was reading emails. Someone sent one in, didn't he, Dave? And Dave had to jump off the call, and we edited it so it sounded like Dave was there. 5 minutes later, I'm still reading this email, Mike. Oh, fucking hell.
People
Dave's
are
like,
so passionate about it, though. And again, I still say the people who listen are the people who get to the end of the show, but they don't want the conversation to be over. So, you know, they're waiting for us to be able to record and then release the episode so they can almost be involved in that conversation. And yeah, it was just bizarre. And again, this is so weird for a couple of fucking, ultimately, Mike, middle-aged blokes, right, watching reality TV. But I'm looking at the stats now, like 71% of our audience is female. Our biggest proportion of, you know, if you look at age groups and stuff, is 23 to 27-year-olds. We've got 32%. So our sort of sweet spot is females in the 23 to 27 year bracket. And it's like listening to me and Chris talk about these fucking fake romances on reality TV. It is just bizarre.
It is. And then what makes it worse, Mike, is when Dave's podcasting partner decides that when we're doing the UK one, we're getting all this success, that we will do the US one at the same time, because they overlapped for nearly a month, and we were doing 2 podcasts a day for them two, having to watch them both at different times because of the American time difference. Then do Comics in Motion, then do the VHS Strikes Back. Yeah, to say I was off Dave's Christmas card list was
fucking hell. That was brutal, wasn't it? I just literally had to wake up in the morning, watch the American Love Island. You know, having got a head full of UK Love Island that I've just watched, you know, the previous evening, and 2 shows a day was rough, and it was it 5 or 6 days a week? I think the US was 5 and the UK was 6, wasn't it? You know, it's slightly different, but that was brutal. So, you know, the fact that we've got nearly 100,000 downloads is more because we've got so many fucking shows. Only 10 downloads per episode.
It is a weird one. I mean, I have interest with Comics in Motion. I'll say what I think first. I don't get much listener feedback, which is fine, because I don't have a specific niche. I don't have the same audience. I've always kind of been saying, you know, I just want to have these interesting conversations with people, and I record them and put them on the internet. They're more for me, really. But obviously I do cater to the audience to some degree and things. But I don't really get anyone contact me saying, oh, the show was amazing, unless it's Tony. Say the show was amazing, or this, that, the other. Apart in the last 2 years, I think, other than Tony, I've probably had about 3 to 5 people maybe who I don't know already who listen to the podcast and send me some sort of message, and that's fine. I don't do it for the messages, but obviously my podcast there's no niche, so just listen to a podcast. If you like it, maybe check out the subscription, but if you love one of the episodes of the podcast, you're not necessarily going to love the next 1 or 2. But with Comics in Motion and VHS Strikes Back and the other podcasts that aren't the reality cast, do you guys get much listener interaction with those?
You know what? It's funny we were talking about this. The VHS one, like we've done Smoking the Bandit, and obviously Dave is my favourite film ever. It is just the ultimate film for me. We send a tweet out on that, Mike, and it just goes crazy. Like, I think people around our age, mine and Dave's age, they just relate to it, don't they, Dave? And we get a load of shit, and then you like people listening. And I've mentioned another film called Eat My Dust, which I remember as a kid, and it stars Ron Howard, Richie Cunningham, and I genuinely don't really remember it, but I remember absolutely loving it, like this VHS holy grail I used to have to rent when I went in the video shop. And so many people want to talk about these old films, like we shit on Top Gun, and people just messaging away. Whereas with the comics, it's the same sort of downloads, but I don't know whether because you've got people from all over the world. Like at one point, I think with the comics on Podbean, we had like over 3,000 followers, didn't we, Dave? And it was like, where the hell are these people coming from? And it was all over the place, Mike. But interactions wise, it's very hit and miss. You know, we I don't know whether it's just one of them where they don't send it through. It's not from us wanting to try and all the downloads, but I don't know. I can't work out what that is as such. But at the end of the day, we're still getting the numbers. It's just interesting. I think it's a great question, to be honest, Mike, how that works. And I think the thing is, when we do the reality stuff, it's throwaway paper, it's newspaper, chip shop newspaper stuff, because once you've done an episode, it's pretty much dead in the water until someone goes and watches it on a box set, because it's got a timestamp on it from that day, especially Love Island. It's on for 6 weeks. But whereas we did streamline the comics and that, where we used to do like a news section for 20 minutes, and we cut all that out because we didn't want a timestamp on the episodes, because we thought, well, if someone watches an episode and we're giving all this news out, it's not going to be relevant in 2 years, 3 years' time. Do you know what I mean? So we've done it that way. So it's a good one, though. We'd have to have a look at it properly, but I know for a fact that the VHS one, for some daft reason, people just love it when we shit on the movies, don't they?
Yeah. And I think it's one of those that kind of, there's a passion about it. And I'm sure there's like a volume thing as well. There are so many, different comic podcasts that all have their own little niches, and again, that's why I'm passionate about what we're creating here, because there's all these different niches, and I don't know of another podcast that has the coverage that we do, and we're not finished yet. We've got 4 different shows, all uniquely identified. We've got 3 other days of the week there that we can fill up. Just, it has to be the right person and it has to be the right concept. But yeah, in terms of that interaction, I guess, if we, kind of cover Avengers Endgame, well, there's a million other podcasts that do that. And are we going to come up with that unique perspective that no one else has done to date? Maybe, maybe not. We're not trying to do that. All we're trying to do is to try and dissect it and, give our own opinions and have a conversation about it. But there are less kind of retro. When we set up the VHS Strikes Back, it was intended to be that golden era of home video, so basically when we were growing up mostly. But, there are things there from the 70s, which you'd probably recorded off TV. I'm pretty sure that wasn't legal either, but, everyone did it. Right up to about 2005. So I think it was 2005 when DVDs finally outsold VHS. So we were like, yeah, we have got a big spectrum there. If you're looking at mid-70s to mid-2000s, but let's just do it for fun. We have done almost nothing with the social media with that channel. But again, we get the same. We have a smaller number of downloads, smaller number of listeners, but they're all very passionate and very loyal. And, they don't agree a lot of the time with what our opinions are. And I think quite a lot of the time, Chris and I don't agree with each other's opinions. And I think, again, it's just people feeling like they're part of that conversation and, like I say, just indulging in something, from the past that the nostalgia, it's always better when you remember back, isn't it, than when you actually,
yes,
you're in the present. So, yeah, there's something about that VHS one that kind of triggers people to want to interact, even though we've got a smaller number of listeners. Whereas I think, Chris, it's fair to say, Love Island, we get the most interaction, don't we, by far? And I think that is a numbers game. We've got a lot more listeners there. Again, it's in the public zeitgeist at that time. And so, yeah, we get tons of emails and, yeah, it's brilliant.
I think as well, Mike, sorry to just jump in quickly, is that also works against us because Big Mouth here made a observational comment about one of the contestants on Singletown in the first episode, and he chased me on Twitter and wanted to know what I've been saying. So it doesn't always work for the best. I tell you, the interaction. So Mr. Gobby here, sometimes it does work against me as well. But we're just very opinionated on that. And I think what it is, people like the fact that it's not about being PC and that, because we're not, but we're not going to toe the line. You listen to the official Love Island one, and it's fucking vanilla. They'll be saying stuff like, "Oh, did you see when she pulled her bikini bottoms out of the crack of her arse?" Oh, yeah. And everyone goes, oh, that's amazing. Oh, by the way, we're sponsored by McCain. Whereas we'll be like, "Did you see that fucking prick tried it on with that girl? He's a dickhead." And this is like how we speak on it. So people message us and go, "It's fucking amazing. You just like when I'm watching it." And that's, I think, why it's relatable and why we get more interactions, because we don't hold back on what we say at all. It's like, it's all done within the confines of, we're not trying to be bullies or anything like that, but literally we're just calling out bad behaviour. And I think that's why it gets more interactions, it's more relatable, because we're not sponsored by anybody, we're not affiliated by anybody, which is probably why, because the way we are, but it just seems to hit a niche for what we do, and we love doing it. It's ridiculous, but we just love talking about it.
Yeah, and it's a weird one, is it? Yeah, because I think Dave touched upon it slightly earlier, which was with the Love Island cast, reality cast, it is that thing of within the week of it coming out, it spikes, and I presume that any of the older episodes after the first week or so die down quite a lot, whereas my shows, there's been a couple of episodes I've released that have had like second wins, and I don't know if someone shared it in a circle, not tagged the podcast at all, and it's just kind of gone up, but there's been a couple of episodes I've done. There's one I did with my mate Carla. It was one of the early ones, it was within the first 20, I think, and it's one of my most downloaded episodes, but it only started doing that about 6 to 8 months ago. It just randomly, because I don't eye the numbers that much, it's just every time I upload an episode on Sunday, I'll glance at the statistics and stuff, just see if there's any major spikes or anything like that. And whenever Tony's on, there's a spike, so clearly he's got a lot more interaction with his Twitter followers than potentially I do. But apart from that, it's weird, because mine are like, I get the spike initially for my subscribers, so I have like a general idea how many people are subscribed, and then each episode will get, one or two every couple of weeks generally. But then the odd one will just randomly for like 2 weeks will get like 100 downloads. And you're just like, that episode came out like 8 months ago. I don't even know what caused that. Obviously, sometimes it's just something happened in the news to talk about this thing. Someone Googled it and maybe the podcast came up. So it is a very odd medium, podcasting and things, but it is just fun.
It is, and I think just to finish it all off, and again, I think it's a great point you made, is we used to, from Podbean, when they used to host our shows, we used to just put all the shows directly onto our YouTube channel. And we have got literally the back catalogue of, say, the first 80 to 100 episodes of Comics in Motion are on our YouTube channel. And we've got some of them. We did, what's that one, Dave?
You're going to talk about the losers, aren't you?
Yeah, the losers. And we put the losers on, and it's just me and Dave doing the review, and it clearly says Comics in Motion review of the losers, 2010 or whenever it come out. And we get so much abuse from, I think it's Mexico
in
or
Spanish.
Colombia or something from these people. It's in Spanish. And they just absolutely roast us, because the podcast is 1 hour and 45, which is about 5 minutes shorter than the actual film. They think they're getting the full film. And we've had like fucking 50,000 downloads on the YouTube channel. We've not tagged it. We've not done anything. But when you put the losers in, it comes up as it's the third search or the second search. And it must be like some cult classic in South America. And then we've got other ones there that have just hit it out the park with like thousands. And then you get another one where it's like 5 downloads, 10 downloads on YouTube, because we don't do anything with it. It just goes on there as an audio file playing our loop of the, like the logo for 1 hour and a half. Well, I don't understand the metric of it.
I've just literally, as we've been doing it, right, I just typed in losers, and we come up as the 6th episode. It was actually, that's weird. It comes up, it was our 6th episode on Comics in Motion, and it comes up in, YouTube as the 6th entry there. And because we're using like the poster, and it's 1 hour and 47 minutes, I think people are clicking on it. Even though, like Chris said, it says the losers 2010 review. And we just had all this abuse coming through. But you know what? Fuck it, it's got loads of listeners. They all fucking dislike it.
Yeah.
And it's we're getting off towards the end now because it's getting a bit late, but there's just one more thing I want to ask, just because of that YouTube thing, and then we'll sign off. But with YouTube, I'm kind of torn, because obviously you guys said, and I think I checked this the other day, where you've got, I think, up to the 80 or something mark, and then you guys stopped uploading to YouTube. I'm torn with if I should stop or not, as in uploading to YouTube. It's another avenue for people to look at, and I've had like an extra In the last couple of months, I've had like 10 or 15 more subscribers, or something like lowish, but a fair amount. But none of my videos have had any more views, and all of them, bar the first like 4, pretty much all of them have got less than like 20 views, which is fine. It's not about the numbers thing. But what I worry about is if I contact a guest or something and say, hey, do you want to come on? And then they just, put Genuine Chit-Chat into YouTube, there's some videos on there that have been up for like a year that have got literally 0 views. 0. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I've got little business cards and stuff, which I've got for Genuine Chit-Chat because I got them made quite cheaply and stuff. And obviously I can do graphic design and things. So when I was going out and being more sociable before the lockdown and things, I just take a couple with me. And when I meet someone randomly when you're drunk, you just give them a card and hope they listen. And I've got YouTube on there. So I feel like I can't really take it off YouTube. And it's not that much extra work to put it on there. But I didn't know if you guys stopped doing it because it was effort or because you felt that it maybe hurt how it looks. Do you know what I mean?
I think
change the provider, hosting provider. That was it. So it's really easy to just say, "Do you want to push it to YouTube?" Tick yes, there you go. I know Libsyn and platforms like that do it as well, but because we changed hosting provider, it didn't offer that facility. In the very first episodes, I was doing it all manually. So I was editing video content to what we were doing, only for like the start and the end, and then the middle of it is just our logo.
Yeah.
But I think where we are at the moment, where there's just not really any payback for it. So unless you're doing like a live broadcast where, you see other podcasts, don't you, and they're beaming into the studio, so you can actually see people moving about.
Yeah.
For me, if you're going to put something on YouTube, it has to be some kind of visual content as well as audio. I just don't think there's any value. You've got a lot more reach with YouTube. A lot more people watch YouTube than they do listen to podcasts through whichever device and what have you. But I don't know. For me, it's just not worth it because it's the wrong medium.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do, like, I've done travel vlogs for like the last 2 years, and like I pay for something called TubeBuddy, which is like £3 a month. And basically I can, what it is with YouTube, it's your tags, your search bars. You've got to use all the techniques. So if you say like me and Dave are doing the Avengers, right? And we're doing the Avengers review. What you've got to do is you've got to put the right tags in. You can only have 800 characters in your tags, but you've got to tag your YouTube videos. So what you're doing is you're looking for a title. So what you do is you put in your search bar of YouTube, Avengers Endgame, and you'd look at every single, say, the first 10 that come up, Avengers Endgame, make a note of them. That's your first 10 tags. Then you go on Google and put Avengers Endgame in and see what comes up. And your first 10 things in the search bar on Google, they're your next load of tags. Then you would tag your show. So you always have to have your show name in it. You've always got to have something like relatable, like podcast or podcaster or whatever. You put them in. And then it's a case of you then look at Avengers Endgame and then through this TubeBuddy, what you do is you put your URL in of your video, even if you've not uploaded it, but you've like got it there and it's a planned scheduled thing. You then put it up against a similar podcast or similar and look at that, and it'll show their tags, what they've done, how many listeners they've had, and I do all that. And look, my YouTube channel, I've got about 300 subscribers, but my actual watchable numbers are really good for me. Subscribers. I've got friends of mine who do a lot of the vlogging, the Vegas and New York stuff. They've got like 1,000 subscribers, but they've not got any more, views to me. Like my biggest video on there of my vlogging stuff's 5,000 views, but I've got like, say, 35, 40 videos, and I've got nothing less than, say, 200-300 views on them. It's not got me any money, but I know that I'm halfway there to monetizing my channel. So when we go on holiday again, because obviously it's when you go away, I only do the vlogs, then hopefully that'll come. But with YouTube, it's like anything. It's like Instagram and Twitter. And we and Dave are like that. We don't completely do it properly, but there is an art to it. And you've got to be so fucking committed. The consistency of it. And YouTube is all about watching more videos because there's so many content creators. It's so much more harder to make money to get people to watch your content now. And I do think there's the visual side of it. We are behind me and Dave, but in the same respect, we couldn't release them as visual podcasts some of the shit that we say that never goes in the show, we would never be able to do it, would we, Dave? You know, it's just, I'm terrible for just fucking throwing random shit out there, Mike. That just, some of it doesn't even make sense. But also, I'm too honest. My swearing is out of control most of the time. So it's like, you couldn't do that. I'm not saying you're not allowed to swear. You watch Joe Rogan's podcast, things like that. But to make it polished and that, to do a live podcast for what we do, as much as I want to do one, I think you're also putting handcuffs on yourself, because you've still got to, you really stuck to your content for that time. So I did it with my game streaming. I've got like a game streaming channel. I've got hundreds of videos on there. Some of them I've got hundreds of listeners, and exactly like you just said, I've got some that I've not got a fucking listener on, and it's 2 hours of me talking to myself, because you're putting it on a stream like a Twitch or a Mixer, and I'm chatting shit about a game, and you might think you've got, and that's what they say, you've just got to get used to talking to yourself and just stuff like that. It's so difficult, Mike. It really is. I've tried every technique possible, and I even change my videos every few months and the tags and stuff to get me up them search things, and it's fucking really hard. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, my last point on that will be with YouTube. I was aware of the tags. I think it's a character count of 500 in total, something similar to that. And I know the title has to be 100 characters and things like that. And when I do tags, when I write my show notes and things, I write the show notes and stuff, and then I write out loads of tags because I've got like a WordPress site that's what I use for the first 6 months or so of podcasting, when I was uploading stuff for free before I needed a higher bandwidth, and that's why I started paying for Podbean and stuff. So I'd write out all these tags and things, and I use most of them for YouTube, and then I also change those tags into hashtags, but I make them applicable. And so every time when I'm editing and stuff, I've got 3 sets of 30 hashtags specifically for Instagram, because I try and post 3 times a week with to do new episodes with different hashtags, and I do like variants of it. So if it's like a movie podcast, for argument's sake, I'll have hashtag movie, hashtag movies, hashtag movie podcast, and then one of them will go on the first set of 30, one will go on the second set of 30, and you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm quite meticulous with it. And I've spoken with Frank Byrne, who we spoke about very early on in this podcast, and he's been on my show a couple of times and things, but he's completely come off social media, as in Facebook, Twitter, and everything. And he said that his numbers have not only not suffered, but they've actually been growing since he did it. Which I'm just like, I can't fathom that, because I'm not saying he's lying in any way, but I'm just like, I feel like if I stop social media tomorrow, which part of me wants to do, because it's quite a ball ache sometimes on a late night, and I'm like, oh crap, I haven't posted about any new episodes for ages. It is one of those things I was like, am I actually reaching people? And are people seeing these things on Instagram and actually listening to my show? Or is it really just the same 10 people who see my thing, like it, and then no one else who likes it is actually listening? And I think that's one of those annoying questions you can't really know the answer to unless you stop.
Yeah. I think it's a leap of faith, isn't it? I can't see. I mean, there must be some other variable going on there, mustn't there? But
yeah,
I think it is kind of podcasting 101. You kind of have to get your voice out there somehow, because unless you have a killer niche, and that is the best way, isn't it? If you've got an absolute niche that someone is literally going to go to their podcast catcher and type in. And like I say, that's probably one of the things that benefited us with Love Island, that there just wasn't that many podcasts doing it, strangely enough. So if you go in and type Love Island, then we, at least in the early days, we were appearing one of the first. So you would automatically listen to us. And so unless you have that, you've got to push with social media. And I think we're not great at this, but I think you've just got to engage with people. You can't be like, come and listen to my podcast or whatever. I think you have to engage in conversations and try and help people. And then, if you're interested, actually, on Twitter, I think you do a good job of it, where you're like, listen to these, someone's asking for podcast suggestions. I'm still pretty sure 90% of them are bots of some sort. Don't know why they ask it, but you'll say, well, if you're looking for this, listen to these. If you're looking for this kind of thing, listen to these. Oh, and if you bored of them, by the way, I do a podcast as well. I think it's a nice way of trying to help someone, but then do a little bit of sort of stealth promotion as well. But I don't think it's all about everyone, each individual podcast creator finding that sweet spot of doing what they need to do to get stuff out there, get listeners, who are passionate about the same things, but just making sure it's sustainable, because only, probably less than 1%, probably even that, 0.1% podcasters are going to actually make money. Even the ones who have Patreons and everything and sponsorships and whatever, there's no way they get back what they put in. So, it's all the labour of love. And so you just have to find that sweet spot for yourself. What is sustainable to keep me going? Because, that ultimately, if it becomes like a job, then you're going to give up. And there's lots in the podcast graveyard, isn't there?
Exactly, especially for you guys. Shots fired.
Yeah. Right, bigger than most.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, guys. You've been very generous with your time. I know it's getting late. It's been really fun to have you on. It's always fun to chat with the two of you. And if you just want to give a quick note of your podcasts, we've been talking about it quite a lot, but just let people know where they can find you, and we'll wrap up.
Okay, so we have the VHS Strikes Back available on all podcast catching apps. We've got Comics in Motion, which we've talked about, haven't we, Dave? What else have we got?
We have the CD, which is C for Charlie, D for Delta, reality cast. And there, this started out as the Love Island cast, but basically we've covered Too Hot to Handle. Mike, even you got sucked into that one. The Netflix
I did.
show. We did Love is Blind, also on Netflix. We'd started doing Singletown, and then we've recently, there's 2 episodes out, but we have started to do what might be the trashiest reality TV show that we've ever come across before. And I use those words as a pun intentionally, because in the whole premise of the show is there's this lady, she's 41, she hasn't paired up, she hasn't found her soulmate or life partner or even a sperm donor. And so they've got 15 guys who the aim of the show is to win the competition and impregnate her so she can have a baby.
What?
And the very first episode, they all have to go into, they're all stood there and they've got this van with different doors on it. It's a bit like if you go to a festival or something and you've got those portaloos or whatever. They all have to go in and give a semen sample to test their sperm count, to check that they're eligible to go forward in the show.
While the girls there and all the lads are egging them on. It's fucking amazing.
What?
It is a crazy concept. But how can you not jump on the phone, or jump on a podcast and just fucking dissect that? And it's just brilliant. So, yeah, that's the latest one we're covering, which is such a car crash, and we love it.
Amazing. And a quick shout out as well to Chris with your Wrestling Gold podcast as well, which Dave is not associated with that podcast, but it's a Chris solo effort, which obviously you spoke about.
Until Chris gets his ass whooped by Scott.
Yeah, and Dave's going to be in Scott's
with that one.
Yeah, Dave's going to be in Scott's corner as his manager, the fucker. Yeah, so
I can't wait for that. And if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, listen to a couple episodes past of Genuine Chit-Chat where I had Chris and Scott on, and we speak about exactly that. But yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you on as always, guys. And yeah, I'm sure I'll have you on again soon.
Oh, thanks a lot, mate.
Cheers, mate. Catch you soon.
And that's the end of the podcast. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. Coming up next week, I've got a podcast due for recording on Thursday with a heavy band. If that all goes to plan, that will be the episode that gets released on Sunday. Don't know how long the chat's going to be, so don't know if it's going to be a 1 or 2-parter, so that'll be cool. The following week, I've got a chat with, I've got a friend of mine who I often see in Wales. It's not my friend Alex Hart, who's been on the show a couple of times, but it's actually someone I met through him. He's starting up a podcast soon, and he's a great guy. I was going to have him on recently before the lockdown happened anyway, so he's going to be coming on soon. I've got a repeat chat with Janine Mercer planned, so she'll be on again in the coming future. And I've also got the episode with Paul and Emily from Parent Guide to GCSE. I've got a chat with them that's already been recorded and things, so I'll be releasing that at some point too. So I just want to kind of give an idea of the kind of stuff you get to experience. So it's going to be music ones, an educational one, and then one that's going to be about random stuff to do with, I don't know, Wales, I guess. And another one which is with Janine Mercer, which our chats always go around the weird and macabre and paranormal and all that sort of jazz. So they're the kind of things you can expect from Genuine Chit Chat over the coming weeks. I am guesting on Mandatory Marvel and DC in the coming weeks as well, which obviously from this chat that you just listened to with the guys from Comics in Motion, you'll know that Mandatory Marvel and DC is one of the many shows on Comics in Motion. Comics in Motion is the main flagship podcast, which has Chris and Dave reviewing comic book movies and things. You've got Indie Comic Spotlight with Tony Farina. Tony was on the show about 4 episodes ago. We didn't really talk about Indie Comic Spotlight, but he was on the show. Max from Mandatory Marvel and DC, him and Dave from this chat, they were on the show a couple weeks ago as well to talk about Mandatory Marvel and DC, but also talk about the DC movies, the what on earth the Snyder Cut means for Justice League, Batman vs Superman, those sort of things. And then there's my other show, Star Wars Comics in Canon, which can be found also on the feed of Comics in Motion. I know that there's a couple other podcasters that are going to be getting involved as well, but I'm not going to speak about them because it's not my place. So there's going to be more coming on the Comics in Motion podcast feed, as you heard from more so spoken about in part 1 of this chat, that Chris and Dave are aiming to get a different podcaster having a different show on their feed every day of the week. That's generally how it is. Mine comes out on Saturdays, so for the weekend you've got Saturdays Star Wars Comics in Canon, and then on Sundays you've got this show, Genuine Chit-Chat. That's pretty much it from me, guys. So unless you're interested in the next episode of Star Wars Comics in Canon, I wouldn't listen any further. But I will just quickly say Star Wars Comics in Canon, the episode that will have just been released, so as of you guys listening to this, it will be out by now, is the 2nd volume of the main run of Star Wars comics. It's basically set between episodes 4 and 5. It's after Luke, blew up the Death Star, and then Vader's basically trying to search for him and things. So the first volume was about how Vader got Luke's name, and the second volume is about Luke sort of training a little bit more. He meets a guy called Gracchus the Hutt, which is quite cool, on this planet called Nar Shaddaa, which is the moon of Nal Hutta, and Nal Hutta is where the Hutts come from. So it's quite a cool one where Luke loses lightsaber to a Hutt, and then he sees some Jedi relics, he gets trained up and things, while you also learn about Han Solo's wife, Sana Solo, as well as Chewie having a fight with a bounty hunter. So that's what you can expect. If you really like Star Warsy stuff and you're getting into Star Wars things a lot more, I'd really recommend checking out my show, because it's meant to be a guide for people who, either if you're a super fan, if you're a beginner, or if you're just in the middle. If you don't have to subscribe necessarily to Comics in Motion, I'd really recommend it, but you can always just keep an eye on it and just see what episodes come up, because certain ones pique your interest. The first episode I did was all about Kylo Ren and how he got his red lightsaber crystal, what happened to him straight after the Jedi Temple stuff happened in episode 8. Lots of different things like that. So that was episode 1, and then I think I'm on episode 13 now, so there's some about the prequels, Obi-Wan and Anakin before episode 2 but after episode 1. There's these ones that are the main run of Star Wars comics between episodes 4 and 5, sequel trilogy stuff, there's stuff to do with the Solo comics, to do with Rogue One, how Cassian Andor met K2SO, lots of different things. So make sure you check that out and take a look, because some of the episodes are a bit shorter, 15-20 minutes, while others kind of go up to more the 40-minute mark. So take a look, see what you like. And really, that's it from me, guys. There's not much else for me to add at this moment. I have been on another episode of The Room, which is where I did my first bout of voice acting. So that's another episode out for that. So check out Room Podcast, and you'll be able to find me on there. I'll include links in the description and stuff. And yeah, just thanks so much for listening, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out Star Wars Comics in Canon. Thanks for listening to Genuine Chit-Chat. And thanks for just being awesome. I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you're all dealing with the lockdown in a healthy way, or as healthy as you can. I wish good wishes to everyone you know and all your family. And once again, I just want to thank you for listening to the podcast. So that's it from me, guys. And I'll talk to you next week.